Hi, this is Andrew Nemec of the Oregonian and Oregon Live. I'm joined by a host of people today. As always, high school football guru Jordan Johnson joins me. Jordan, how you been, man? Been a while.
Good, buddy.
Alex Brink, coach of eForce, former football player at Washington State University. Dennis Dixon, former Oregon Ducks quarterback, also coaching eForce. And then eForce owner and former Oregon Duck defensive back, Ryan DePalo. Guys, thanks for joining me. You have your first tryout/practice coming on Saturday at Lake Ridge from 1 to 3. I guess we'll start with Jordan. Jordan, how did all this stuff come together? It seemed like for a while there, Oregon 7-on-7 wasn't where it needed to be. In the last couple of years, it's been on the rise, and it seems like it's kind of culminating now with a staff that a star-studded staff and a star-studded roster.
Yeah, a lot of good coaches. DePalo and Brink have kind of taken the reins with eForce and brought in a bunch of good people. We're going to have the top kids, pretty much 80-90% of the top athletes within Oregon representing us on the 7-on-7 circuit. So we'll be able to hit a few the national tournaments upcoming here. So the next few months will be where we get some practices in, some exhibition games, stuff like that. But it's exciting. It's good exposure for kids at the Northwest, as we've talked about. And it's going to allow these kids to get out in the national circuit and show themselves.
Still the same talent base. I know last year you had probably, 22 of the top 25 prospects in the state. It sounds like that's the case again this year. The only difference is you're connected with eForce. Ryan, you own eForce. How did you guys get connected, and how did this thing get rolling to where now you have the top talent in the state?
Well, as far as eForce as a whole, there's a performance side, and then there's the football side. On the football side, Alex and I linked up, and Alex and I kind of founded eForce Football from the very beginning. And how it all came together, as far as, I know that they work with a lot of athletes. Alex has in the past. I work with a lot of athletes myself. And, one of the things that we had in common was football in general and working with kids and training them. So as they started talking about the upcoming years and putting together a 7-on-7 team, I thought I would reach out to guys like Dennis Dixon and Nemec to have them get involved, to kind of have this superior coaching staff with the talent of kids that they work with already.
Now, how hard was it to talk a guy like Dennis Dixon and Michael James into coming out and doing that? Dennis, was that something you were immediately excited about doing, working with the top players in Oregon, or was that something that maybe took a little coaxing?
No, I definitely wanted to put my 2 cents into it. Seeing that I come from California, that's somewhat of a staple for these grassroots kids. At the end of the day, you just want exposure, and to have a platform to be able to do that and just to be in conversation with that, I'm honored.
You were in like an NFL quarterback challenge thing when you were coming up, and I know you were involved in 7-on-7. It was established for a long time in California, hasn't always been in Oregon. What are the benefits? What are some of the things you learned from 7-on-7 or some of the contacts you made through 7-on-7 that maybe you wouldn't have had a chance to had you just played high school football?
I think at the end of the day, when you go back to your respectable team, when you do the 7-on-7s these days, you learn a lot. You become wiser. You become that ultimate leader that you want to be when you actually go back to your respectable team. And it's just a lot of word of mouth. I think once you actually have somebody that from your school that be able to go to a 7-on-7 and bring that back to the team, it brings it gels the team a lot faster. So.
Are you surprised at all by high school kids in Oregon's reaction to you and LaMichael? I'm sure a lot of those guys, I know Elijah Molden grew up watching Duck football. I know a lot of the kids did. So I'm sure they still see you as an absolute star. They probably jaw drops. What is that experience like for you to work with those kids who are still kind of in awe of you?
At the end of the day, I'm at awe. To be honest. Just to be able to be with these top elite athletes. I know that they have a lot to bring to the table. This is all about having an opportunity to do it. And I'm just happy just to be a part of that, to be able to push them through.
Now, what's your role going to be on a day-to-day, tryout-to-tryout, practice-to-practice, game-to-game basis? Are you going to be working with quarterbacks? Are you helping select the team? What's your role?
I think at the end of the day, I just want to be more position-specific. I think it would be more the quarterback route, but I'm open to anything, to be honest, just to be able to make this thing take off.
And Brink, you're going to be working with quarterbacks too. How much are you guys going to agree, or have to go to the side and say, hey,
We're
like,
gonna
man,
be okay.
you
Well,
guys agree on the
it's-
same stuff
it's-
despite different styles playing?
It's funny because, Dennis and I have had our battles playing. I'm sure some people remember it. We played against each other in, 06, 07, both years. So I think I got one and then he got one too. And so it's, as far as this, there's going to be no issues in regards to, the coaching styles and that sort of thing. I mean, both of us have been, grew up in high school programs that were successful, college programs that were successful, and then ultimately had an opportunity at the professional level. And so, that base of knowledge is always going to be there. And I think the benefit is that kids and a lot of the guys I've worked with, they've heard my voice for a long time, and now they're going to get to hear another voice of a guy that's been through the battles too. And so that's a whole nother perspective. And then you start adding, even other quarterback coaches that we're going to have involved, like Darren Thomas, Kyle Rowley, who's a part of the Portland Thunder, guys that have a ton of experience. I think from a quarterback side specifically, there's going to be just a ton of things that those kids are going to be able to take away from not only the 7-on-7, but, the camps and clinics and all those things throughout the year.
Now, Oregon 7-on-7, again, a little bit disjointed for a number of years, and it was strong, but there wasn't always consistent in-state competition with the elite guys getting reps. You had to go up to Seattle a lot. What does this coaching staff allow you to do, and what kind of things do you have set up to compete against the nation's best, where maybe in past years you didn't have this quite as in place as you do now?
Yeah, I think the advantage is by having more coaches involved and more guys that, again, have the experience of 1, 7-on-7, but 2, that the high level playing and coaching, we can do more events and have more teams. So in the past where it's been, we'd have an upper class elite team and potentially an underclass team, we're able to create, that elite team, an underclass team, a freshman team, and even an 8th grade team of top athletes in the state of Oregon. So now these guys are getting exposed to, 7-on-7 from a pretty early age. And then on top of that, instead of going to, say, just one tournament in Las Vegas, we can hit Vegas, go down to Northern California, and then ultimately hold our own tournaments here in Portland and bring in top talent from outside.
Sure. What is having guys like Dennis and LeMike and yourself who have that pro experience, what does that allow these athletes to learn that maybe they wouldn't get to learn working with just a high school coach? Do you guys bring a different level of expertise to the table? Not necessarily better, but a different level where they're learning a different side of football maybe than they would working with high school coaches?
I think our role is definitely kind of a different vein than, say, their head high school coach.
Sure.
The head high school coach, they have their goals for the season and what they're trying to accomplish, and really kind of manage those expectations and set those goals, and then how that fits with their team. Our role is more of kind of almost as an instructor, right? We're working on specific skill development, adding the piece that, whether it comes to our experience with reading defenses for quarterbacks or Ryan's experience playing DB at a high level and what he can add to that side. And then again, that exposure piece for kids competing on a national level, because that's what you don't get from your high school in Oregon specifically. Sure. Is you don't get to go up against the number 3 rated corner in the nation. Sure. And that's what you're going to get to do if you're a part of one of these teams down in Las Vegas or in San Francisco.
To me, Oregon's a state where you don't necessarily always get to produce film against elite talent. You look at a guy like Anthony Adams at Newburgh, he plays safety, corner, and he plays a little bit of quarterback. He might best fit at wide receiver, a place where he doesn't get a chance to show a lot of film, and even if he does go out to that side of the field or go to the outside, he doesn't always do it against elite talent. 7-on-7 allows him to produce some high-level film against high-level competition. How much do you see that as being an extra benefit, Jordan, in the state of Oregon, where these kids aren't going against, during their regular season high school schedule, aren't going against other 3- and 4-star prospects like maybe kids in California and Texas and Florida would? Does it make it that much more important in Oregon to have an elite team that's getting reps, play in, play out against guys like Elijah Molden, Brady Breeze, and obviously vice versa on the other side of the field?
Yeah, I think it provides justification. The Northwest traditionally hasn't been a recruiting hotbed. So when we went out to Vegas last year, the Team Oregon group that finished in the Final Four, Anthony Adams, Brady Breeze, David Morris, Elijah Molden, that secondary right there, all Division I kids, and they get to go against the top receivers in the country, the Cali, the Texas, the Florida kids. So when you're going against Oregon competition, it kind of is what it is. That film, you have no choice, right? But when you have that competition level that you're playing against, and you're beating those guys, that allows you to say, look, I went against the best, I beat the best, and so on. So from our standpoint, not only do we have the top coaches in the region, but you're going against the top kids. So with both of those elements put together, we're looking to build on that and provide these kids with an opportunity, these kids and families, to help them in the with regards to recruiting and just moving forward. So it's definitely a good opportunity for them.
Question for any of the coaches. I know in years past there's been some pushback from high school coaches that they don't necessarily want their kids doing 7-on-7, that potentially Dennis Dixon or Alex Brink or Darren Thomas telling a quarterback to do something that maybe would differ from what the high school coach would tell him to do. It bothers the high school coach, and they haven't been real receptive of allowing you guys to work with their top talent. How much pushback do you get from high school coaches, or do you feel like right now you've got everybody on board? Because I know in the past there's been years where certain coaches have not been on board with 7-on-7 football.
Well, I think, like you mentioned, with kind of the growth of 7-on-7 in California, and Dennis could speak to this, that those high school coaches, whether it's through their specific teams or these kind of groups, club style teams, that they've been on board and they've seen their athletes as a whole and their teams as a whole get better. And I think in Oregon you're still seeing that growth as far as people seeing the benefit of it. Now there's a ton of high schools and guys that put on tournaments kind of in the early summer, and so they're already doing it, and it's moving that direction. And so for us, when it comes to the coaching and that specific thing, we never want to step on toes in regards to what a kid is being taught from his coach. We want to add to that, if anything, and so we always default back to what those guys know. And then when it comes to our play calling or the playbook for the teams, that's just that's something kind of separate that they get to learn. But I would say that experiences the last couple of years that kids have been off the charts, and I think coaches are seeing that, and they're really gravitating toward that. And as long as we continue to put good people in place from a coaching staff standpoint, I think people are going to continue to be comfortable with it.
Dennis, does it seem silly to hear that maybe Oregon high school football coaches aren't 100% on board with 7-on-7? I know, again, in California, it seems like every elite player competes in 7-on-7 to some extent. In Oregon, that hasn't always been the case, and in fact, some coaches really frown upon their kids competing in 7-on-7. Is that a weird concept to you, having grown up in an environment that may have been different than that?
I wouldn't say it necessarily. I can kind of see some of the pros and cons when it comes to things, but overall, I mean, it's more pro than anything. And I think that's one thing, like, to echo on what Brink was saying, is that, we just want to be able just to add to what they already have, and be able to continue to bring confidence with one another as well, too. I think one thing that kind of speaks for people that have the blueprint, or someone that's been there at the pinnacle level, is that these kids can be very open and very candid to us, and we can be able to, be open and candid to them as well too, just to be able to see what they can get, what they can, the risk factor as to what they can get away with before they get back to their respectable teams. This is the time to be able to expose that.
How much do you want to get into coaching? Is this something that you've thought about for a long time since your playing days, or is this kind of a new thing you want to take on as a new challenge in your life?
I'll be honest, this is kind of fell in my lap. I think I do want to be able to actually see where I can better myself in the coaching. I like to see people develop at a young age and be able to flourish. But at the same time, to be able to do that, you need competition, if not better, to be able to better yourself. So I think as far as 7-on-7, this is a great platform to be able to see where your flaws is, turn weaknesses into strengths. So,
how much do you feel like your mechanics, your footwork, was solidified in high school versus how much you had to learn in college early? And do you feel like having to learn that, if you did, is something potentially that you can translate to some of these other guys that maybe in high school don't totally have it down like you did?
I just think, in off season, I think that's the best time to get better. And I took advantage of that. When you talk about, position camps, being Elite 11, I was very raw. But going to somebody that already have what I want, I wanted that. So I think, this day and age, a lot of kids strive to be the best in their craft. So just to hone in on that and have an environment to be able to expose that, I'm with that.
Who was the person that really refined you? You said you were really raw. I know you've always had arm strength.
Yeah.
I know you've always been able to run.
Yeah.
Who turned you into more of a passer? Because I know, I mean, certainly by the time you were in the Heisman campaign, thick of things, you were a pretty polished quarterback, pretty polished football player.
Yeah, I would just say Randall Cunningham. Randall Cunningham is definitely my mentor. When I was younger. Now he's a pastor in Vegas now. He definitely got me to where I am now. Credit to a lot of other coaches as well too, but I have to say he the one that gave me the drive to be where I am now.
What's your relationship like with him, and what was some of his big advice that really turned your career around?
It was off and on. Right now it's off and on, to be honest, but when I was playing and everything, we was definitely almost like a weekly thing. And as I got to the pinnacle of the whole thing, I looked up to somebody like a Charlie Batch. And to this day, he's one of my mentors as well too. So for people that's already been there and done that, I always want to pin myself. Power association is strong, so I want to be able to associate myself with people like that.
Ryan, are you working with the DBs exclusively, or are you going to be doing kind of the whole defense? What's your plan?
Probably mostly DBs, work with them, and if I need to help on the whole thing with defense, that as well.
You've got a silly collection of talent. You might have the most talent to work with of any of the positions. Elijah Molden's a pretty polished player and has his dad to work with, but you've also got David Morris that's going to be back there, Anthony Adams. How excited are you to work with these guys, and what are some of the things that you're going to focus on early to improve them?
To be honest, it's a blessing to work with guys that have the talent. It's kind of just mastering the little things, little things they might not work on day to day or with their teams, and kind of seeing things, but also looking at things from a different angle. And maybe I can spread some light on some different areas that they might not think about when they're playing defense or guarding someone one-on-one, or different coverage or different ways to look across the field at a guy coming into their zone. So little things like that, because I know when it comes to raw talent, they have that. So it's just kind of mastering their craft overall.
When you look at past years, it seemed like, from when I've been to practices, it seemed like there were guys that had things pretty well down, and they weren't always the best prospects. They had good coaching. They knew what to do. Maybe they weren't the quickest, but they were capable. And you also had guys who were really talented that seemed really raw, and at times even some of the quarterbacks not knowing how to do some of their reads, some of their progression, some of their footwork stuff. Are you guys surprised at times at how far advanced some kids are, and maybe how big the gap is between kids in this state and at the varsity level that doesn't have anything to do with prospects? It has more to do with just how well they've been coached growing up?
Well, there's no doubt that there's a pretty serious lack of development in football overall from like a youth age. I'm not even talking about high school.
Sure.
At the youth level, and a lot of that is you're playing multiple sports throughout the year. So however you develop, like I grew up being a baseball player, right? And so I was a pretty developed baseball player all the way through until my freshman or sophomore year of high school, and then that's when I moved my focus to football. Spent more time on football. Still played other sports because it's important. You're playing multiple sports, but it's kind of where you put that focus. So what you find is that all of a sudden a kid's a sophomore or a junior, and he's a pretty dang talented football player, but he hasn't focused on some of the things like Ryan was talking about, recognition when
Sure.
you're on the field. You can do all the physical things, but the mental side of it you haven't developed. That's what I find with quarterbacks a lot of times. All of a sudden they grow into their bodies and they're these really talented players, but yet they haven't learned the game, from the neck up. They haven't learned how to read defense. They don't know the difference of concepts and, how to throw guys open and that sort of thing. And that's where, for us as high-level coaches, we hope that we can add that piece of it where it's like, hey, when you go to college, you get that opportunity. You're not throwing to guys that are open by 10 yards. You're throwing to guys that are open by a yard or two, and how do you learn to do that? How do you create separation as a receiver, as a DB? How do you recover out of your break?
Sure. What's maybe one of the things you like to see that, and for each of you, what's one thing you like to see at your position that when a kid gets that thing down, or is there a thing that once they get that down, whether it's reading past your first read and being able to do that comfortably, or a DB getting past those first few steps, or knowing how to jam a guy at the line and then open up his hips the right way, what's the thing you see that you go, this kid's starting to get it, and this kid has a chance to be maybe not special, but this kid has a chance to be really talented? Alex, you want to start?
Yeah, I think one thing I can speak from experience kind of right off the bat in regards to 7-on-7 was, we had Sam Neuer, who's committed to go, and going, from Beaverton, going to Colorado next year, and super talented player, but one of those guys that same thing, kind of grew into his body late, and down at the tournament in Vegas last year, I saw things really click for him because he was exposed to some new things from past concepts, seeing defenses, working with some of these other athletes. And I'll never forget the first day he misread a couple throws, and we were talking about not trying to go from look to the left and then look all the way back to the right and make a throw. And it was just one of those things that I think Dennis, I would say, is pretty basic to what we know now. But for a high school athlete or a youth player, you don't know those things intimately. And I'll never forget, we talked about it. The next day, he went through his read, and he went through just like we talked about, go middle of the field, back outside to the right, threw a touchdown pass to a guy on a corner route, and I was like, okay, this is a guy that's got it. So for me, it's the mental recognition on the field, being able to process that information.
He was a kid that when I watched, I saw all the tools individually, and you could see, okay, he's getting the footwork down. Okay, he's had the arm strength. That was never an issue. Okay, the mechanics are there. He needs to put that together. Okay, now that's down. Can he get through his reads? And you really saw that 7-on-7 finally, when he had kind of equal talent around him, and not to disparage Beaverton, it's a good program, but he went into some games. I mean, I think they were the 8 or 9 seed this year, and they made it to the quarters, I believe, and lost to Jesuit 70-7 or something. Just got absolutely thumped. And it doesn't matter how well he has things down if your team's not at that level where you're a Pac-12 prospect and you're getting thumped by Jesuit. He doesn't always have the time to make the plays, and even when he does, there's drop passes, there's not being on the same page with receivers. It seemed like 7-on-7 for him was an opportunity where he really advanced and became a Pac-12 prospect, whereas I don't know if that opportunity would have been afforded to him if he hadn't have shown what he could do at 7-on-7, because there were a lot of games that were kind of throwaway games for film because his team was overmatched.
Yeah, Sam came out, and I think it was 20 TDs and 3 picks. Pretty much him and Brink, you saw them clicking, especially on that second day. We had that 7-game run, lost Bishop Gorman in the semifinals. And Sam, when we got back from Vegas, had Hawaii, a few other mid-majors offer, and then all of a sudden Colorado hit him up, offered, and he made a good decision in committing early. But to what Alex was saying, he made some relatively simple adjustments, listened to what he was telling him, and all of a sudden he's dropping dimes, and we're winning 6-7 games in a row and in the national semifinals. So Sam is a prime example of what can be when you listen to individuals like Alex, Dennis, Ryan, and guys that have been there at a high level. So that's what we're excited to see, some of these guys that are legit D1 kids right now and where they could be, with some of the guidance that they have.
Ryan, a skill that you like to see that you're saying, okay, this guy's starting to get it, maybe this kid has a chance to play some college ball, on top of obviously size, speed. It's not
Absolutely.
just, hey, his hips are good, so he's ready to be a pro, but he's 5'7".
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's basically what I'm going to talk about is if a guy is not just making plays with raw talent, he's actually making plays because he's doing the proper footwork. Another thing that we always used to talk about is, a guy not being in no man's land. He's like, if he's playing third, he's like, I'm in my third, and there's no one there, but he actually understands, like, hey, I can go make a play,
right.
Understanding that type of stuff. Little things like that, like, hey, I'm just not like, hey, I'm checking the box, I did my job, I'm where I'm supposed to be. He's like, hey, every down you can make a play and be part of. And understanding just what's going on, maybe down a distance, understanding, like, hey, it's 3rd and 8, okay? That means you need to know the marker is, understand what type of routes they're going to be running.
Sure.
Picking up by whatever set they come out in, what type of routes they're going to run. Little things like that is going to make an athlete go from, being a guy that's on the borderline to being a guy that's could be recruited.
Later in the podcast, we got to talk about what went on with Oregon, because I think at times, and I will talk to you guys about that, because I think at times Oregon ran, especially early, a lot of cover 3, and there was a lot of checking the box, it felt like, where, guys, I'm in my spot, there's not anybody within 15 yards of me, but I'm actually technically in my spot, and then they dump it off to a running back, and he was uncovered, and he, on a wheel or whatever.
It's called being young.
And I don't think it was bad football, it's kind of a lack of understanding. We'll get into some of that later. Dennis, the thing you like to see that you say, hey, this quarterback's starting to get it?
It's funny. I had to echo on what Brink said too. I think just developing their self-image. I just think personal, like as a young kid for me, I really show my emotions on my sleeve. I think being even keeled when things don't go right. We always talk about the things that we do right, but when things hit adversity, how do we respond to things? You're going to throw a pick. You're going to do something that you may not have the right timing or something like
Sure.
that, but it's how you be able to develop your self-image. And I think once you have that right body language, I think it's like it radiates to all your other players as well.
Trent Dilfer works with the Elite 11 guys, and he talks about that so many times. I think he calls it DQ. It's dude qualities, just that comfort when things go bad, that you're the guy that's comfortable with that. How important is that to a quarterback? You can have all the skills in the world, but I think some fans see a guy and go, God, he's got all the tools. Why isn't he figuring it out? Why isn't he really good? And sometimes it's that it seems like maybe they don't have those character things. How essential is that to a quarterback?
It's huge. I think we always talk about the intangibles, running fast, throwing far, reading initial reads and stuff like that. But, I mean, it's the little things that make a complete quarterback. And, just showing character as far as leadership, it goes a long way in their whole self-image.
When you guys work with kids and you know the ins and outs, so you know that a lot of times, especially some of the rankings, they're ranked on how good an athlete he is. And you guys can, I'm sure, see a 4- and 5-star guy at times and say, well, I talked to him and, not only does he not really understand the game, but he doesn't do all the things right, and those things are all going to be exposed at the college level. How frustrating is it for you guys to work with these kids and then see them rated 2- or 3-star or 4-star and go, man, that just doesn't match what I see? And how important is it that you're able to communicate that with college coaches?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a reason why we do this whole thing, right? Is that here in the Northwest, especially in Oregon, I think there's some really good football players. I think everybody at the table here would say the same thing. And I go back to my experience at Sheldon High School, playing for some great coaches in Marty and Lane Johnson, and seeing some players that got overlooked, or they went to a Big Sky or a mid-major school and then had a ton of success, right? And so they had a ton of success, and I just think if they would have had more exposure, they would have had that opportunity at a high level in that Division I. At a Division I, they would have still been successful.
Sure. Didn't necessarily work with him a tremendous amount, being that he was in Eugene. But Justin Herbert, another Sheldon quarterback, how nice is it to see him getting a Pac-12 opportunity after breaking his leg as a junior? Seems like a few years ago that might not have happened for a kid in the state of Oregon.
Yeah, so really exciting for Justin, for one, and for Oregon high school football, because that speaks to the development of these kids. I mean, Justin was we talked about it before the season. He was hands down a Pac-12 player, and for him, he was going to need to have a big year this year. We knew that, but even at that, there should have been more schools kind of jumping for him, and they didn't. And so I think initially, and now that Oregon jumped on board, it speaks to Justin's talent level, and then also that Sheldon program.
Jumping into a little bit of Oregon Duck football, Dennis, we'll start with you. A lot of people very critical of Oregon's development of quarterbacks, that they've had to go an FCS transfer route back-to-back years. To me, I think there's multiple levels to that. One being, when you've got a guy like Marcus who's really good as a freshman, you're not going to get elite talent necessarily because they don't want to sit behind a star quarterback for 2 or 3 years while he finishes out his career. Another piece is, and I think this is somewhat a criticism of Oregon as a program, they get ahead and they often just run the ball 3 times or 6 times or whatever and punt. They don't let their backup quarterbacks throw the ball much, and they've done that for probably 15 years. That's kind of how it works. What do you see as being the barrier in development? Is it somewhat that it's a crapshoot? Is it a lack of evaluating the right talent, of guys just gotten hurt? What do you see as being the issue there?
At the end of the day, I just say timing and opportunity. I think once you actually do get that, you got to flourish. Even if you are a backup, it's backups out there that definitely get a look as well too. So again, exposure is definitely key. It may not be displayed like on Saturdays, but between Monday and Friday, there's a lot that's going on, and if you carry yourself in a well manner, things would definitely fall into place for you.
Know the offenses are different. It's a couple different offensive coordinators since you were there. But how difficult do you think it would be for an FCS quarterback to come in to a program, if he's a senior and experienced, and run Oregon's offense? Obviously, even if you weren't in the system, you know what it is and you're familiar with it.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. And in the beginning, I mean, the season was somewhat rocky, but as it went on, you can now obviously see that Vernon is definitely progressing to what we thought what we thought he'd be when he first got there. It's just all about timing at the end of the day. Just getting really, really, really focused on what you're doing, and it's definitely showing right now. And I hope you finish off well.
You talk about character being a big deal. I would imagine for a guy like Vernon Adams for Dakota Prukop. Being a leader and being a guy the team buys into is a huge piece. How important do you think it is that those guys have character and aren't just elite talents, but they also mesh well with the team?
That's huge. I mean, not only for them, I mean the coaches as well too. Everybody has got to buy in, and I think once everybody buys in, everything falls into place: offense, defense, and special teams. But once again, every position has got to pick one another up in order for it to work.
Ryan, early in the season, Oregon really struggled defensively, and it seemed like they threw a lot at young players, and it was just kind of too much. It's like, okay, I know where to be, but I don't necessarily know how to be when I'm there. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And kind of getting to the zone and then not knowing when to leave that zone to go make a play. It seemed like things simplified. They ran a lot more cover 3, slowly started introducing more stuff, and the guys are now figuring it out. One, how impressive is it that Oregon was able defensively to make that adjustment and put a streak together? And two, how did you see the progression of this team over the course of the season?
As far as being impressive, I'm not impressed that it happened. I'm impressed with what they did, because with the coaches they have down there, they are going to constantly making adjustments. That's what they do.
Sure.
And with young guys like that, it's all about obviously putting guys in the right place to make plays, but it's confidence. And you can tell the guys are building confidence over each game. And that's a big thing as young guys, as young athletes down there, is just feeling confident, like, okay, yeah, I understand what I'm doing, now I can go make a play.
Sure.
And the more they get that, the more plays they make, the more confidence they have. And, the thing about the secondary they're talking about this year, it's the same stuff that you were talking about guys like Pat Chung, Walter Thurman,
Right.
TJ Ward, and those guys are not doing too bad.
Right.
So, those guys were young. They played early on because they were really good athletes. The same thing's happening now. Next year, our secondary is going to be really good. So,
What do you see that you believe that they're going to be elite now, other than the fact they work with John Neal, who kind of indisputably is one of the best defensive back
Absolutely,
coaches in
yeah.
the country, and it's kind of silly that he gets ripped for what's happening. The guys are in the right spots. They're just not really able to make the play because they don't it's not instinctual. They know what to do. It's that extra second to think about it. But why do you see them becoming maybe elite or really good next year?
to be honest, the coaching staff, the coaches that work with them, and just giving them that confidence to make plays. When you're young and you're in that position a lot, it's like you're creating good habits, you're understanding where to be, what to do, and the more time they're in that position, the more opportunities they're going to see to go make plays, and coming right back to the confidence factor, they'll have more confidence.
Last question for you. You hear a lot of criticism. Pelham should be fired. John Neal, they should get rid of the entire defensive staff. How frustrating when you're in it, and Dennis, maybe you can talk about this too, how frustrating when you know what that staff brings to the table is it to hear the fans just calling for coaches' heads when they have no idea what's really going on, and even when they're watching it on the field sometimes, they don't realize, well, that guy was actually in the right place to make a play, he just didn't make the play.
I'll be honest, it's really frustrating. It's sometimes really hard to watch a game in the stands to listen to people that have no idea what they're talking about, don't understand what's going on, don't understand scenarios, don't understand that this guy's hurt, don't understand that this guy's now playing a different position, doing certain things, or he might be in the right position, but something else happened with the linebacker or defensive line or whatever's happening. It's just, honestly, it's very, very frustrating to hear it, and, it's one of those things you just kind of block out.
Dennis, that kind of, yeah. All right, guys, well, thank you very much for joining me. eForce football starts Saturday from 1 to 3 at Lake Ridge High School. It sounds like a lot of the premier talent in the state's going to be there. I know I've confirmed with a number of the top players in the state that they will be there trying out, which I think it's going to essentially be an Oregon All-Star team is the way it's shaping up. So it should be really exciting. Guys, thank you very much for joining me. I know I took up quite a bit of your time.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, you wanna go eat?